Hello and welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is American Ben. Well, after over 40 years, the Skywalker saga has come to a close, and with the rise of Skywalker, J.J. Abrams provided us with answers to many of the questions we still had going into the film. Of course, the rise of Skywalker itself left us with many lingering questions, including, is it even worth it to do this anymore? Thank you, Baby Yoda. Thank you for giving me a reason to go on. Anyway, some of the other questions that arose following the film concern the Force. Now, we've always known that the Force can connect Force-sensitive beings in some way, and we certainly have known since The Last Jedi that Rey and Kylo are somewhat connected by the Force. However, in Rise of Skywalker, Kylo tells Rey that the two make up a dyad in the Force. This is a new term, and it was invented to emphasize that the connection between the two is not some ordinary Force bond. Let's explain. But first, please go and check out our Instagram page at The Generation Films, where we are fighting for humanity one meme at a time. It's also another way for us to interact with and get feedback from you. So I will get to specifically defining the term Force dyad, but first we have to discuss the Force and the relationships in it, so by the time we get to discussing the term Force dyad, we can fully understand it. So I know you probably just want the answer now, but please hang in there because there's a lot to cover. So of course the only beings that are relevant to this video are those that are Force sensitive, so we need to remember what it means to be Force sensitive. A Force user is any living organism that is more attuned to the energy field flowing through physical reality, known as the Force. Accessing such energy allows a Force sensitive to augment their physical and mental abilities, as we see with the Jedi and Sith. Now, when I say the Force flows through physical reality, what I mean is that the energy that makes up the Force exists throughout the material universe and is connected. And thus the energy that Force sensitives derive their power from is shared by all Force users. It's not separate for each individual. What is separate is the midichlorians in an individual's cells that have some sort of correlation with Force sensitivity. But the energy itself is an entire field, and this means that to some degree all Force users are connected. Now, we've known about Force bonds in the galaxy for a long time. Force bond is a general term to describe some sort of Force connection between two Force-sensitive individuals, though what it usually means at a minimum is that the two Force users who are bonded can sense and communicate with each other through shared Force visions, even if on opposite sides of the galaxy from each other. Shared Force visions were more than just imaginary happenings experienced by paranoid schizophrenics. Yeah, they blurred the line between psychic vision and real-life event. As we saw in The Rise of Skywalker, very strong Force bonds can even allow for the teleportation of objects from one user to the other. And Force bonds could be formed between any two users of the Force, whether two dark side users, two light side users, or one dark side user and one light side user. As dark side Force users attempt to manipulate the Force for their evil schemes rather than become one with it, so too did they often use Force bonds to take advantage of users on the other side of the bond. There were even some cases in which the dark side Force user in a bond was able to keep the knowledge of the bond away from their bonded partner, and in such cases the dark side user was often able to manipulate the unaware user to their advantage. Many Jedi, including Luke Skywalker, saw Force bonds as a dark side power. I think this is probably because, as we see with Rey and Kylo, the shared visions have to be initiated to some degree by one of the bonded users. Jedi, who are known to just accept the Force as it is and try to go with its flow, wouldn't usually be inclined to cultivate a bond, the visions of which are a bit of sorcery. Religious fanatics, killing witches, you get it. Anyway, when Jedi did form Force bonds, it usually would have been between Padawan and Master. One well-known Force bond was between Count Dooku and Yoda. Darth Sidious, Dooku's master at the time, wanted to take advantage of this bond in order to influence Yoda to the dark side by presenting him with dark illusions, but Yoda of course was too strong to be swayed. Additionally, Jedi Padawan Ezra Bridger developed a bond with Sidious's first apprentice Darth Maul, and as a side effect experienced dark hallucinations as well. This almost led Bridger to kill a rebel trooper on Atollon, whom he thought was a Dathomirian Night Brother. So you can see why Force bonds are generally seen as negative disruptions in the Force by light side users. It's not really known why any two beings become bonded in the Force, especially as it's not always relatives or like-minded beings who become bonded. I imagine it involves both parties having a certain level of Force sensitivity and at times an all-powerful third-party Force user to initiate the bond. More on that in a bit. Now, what's the point of discussing force bonds and going through examples of force bonds in history? Well, first off, force bonds are a higher level of connection between two force users. Up until we knew about force bonds, we thought that simple connections between closely related force users were the strongest connections in the force. But the connection that Kylo and Rey have is much different than the connection that Leia and Luke had, or Vader and Luke had. Also, Kylo and Rey do have a bond, and their dyad, or rather the dyad that they make up, is an extension of their bond, or actually a higher level of their bond. How Kylo and Rey's force bond developed is unknown. What we do know is that to some degree Snoke manipulated their connection, or maybe even awakened or enhanced it. Side note, I suppose we should say Palpatine instead of Snoke now, but for the sake of clarity, we are going to pretend that Snoke was his own person and not molded from Palpatine's fecal matter. The bond between Rey and Kylo allowed them to communicate with each other and to an extent even physically interact with each other using shared force visions. Now in theory, the strength of a force bond depends on the force sensitivity of the users involved, and the stronger the bond, the more the users can do in terms of interacting with each other psychically. This is why Rey and Kylo can go so far as touching each other and teleporting items to each other through their bond in the Force. They are both extremely strong with the Force, having descended from a mix of the genes of some of the strongest Force users in galactic history. So it's not such a surprise that the strength of Kylo and Rey's Force bond is unprecedented. What we also learn from Rey and Kylo's bond is that as the individual Force powers of the users involved in a bond increase, the stronger the bond gets. Rey and Kylo became more powerful in their bond as they became more powerful as separate Force users. Their bond became so strong that they actually ceased to be two separate individuals. That is what a Force dyad is. It is when a Force bond becomes so strong that the separation between two Force users bonded in the Force ceases to exist. As Kylo said, the two are one. This actually probably explains a lot. Think about it. When Ben Solo was Kylo, he desperately wanted to be the supreme leader of the galaxy. His dark side ambitions were unmatched by anyone not named Palpatine. Now, why would a power-hungry maniac like that who seems hell-bent on crushing the Jedi constantly offer Rey the chance to join him in ruling the galaxy? Of course, at first we thought it was the same reason that any Sith Lord tries to bring powerful Force users over to the dark side, in order to secure their rule. We saw this with Palpatine and Luke as well, as Palpatine offered Luke the chance to rule the galaxy at his side. Yet I'm not sure Palpatine was ever sincere about this and may have just wanted to possess Luke's body in order to rejuvenate himself. Which is almost another form of two Force users becoming one, but that's for another video. In Kylo's case, it's not that he wants to share power, it's that he knows that he needs Rey because they are a dyad in the Force. As in, his power is not whole without Rey. He is not whole without Rey, and he knows this. I'm speaking in theory here, but I believe that had Kylo Ren existed on the dark side of the Force for longer, his and Rey's bond might have become so strong as to eliminate all of their separation save for their bodies, and their minds might have become completely one. But Kylo reverted into Ben before we could figure that out. Yes, Bens always disappoint. Given what we learned re the Force dyad in The Rise of Skywalker, it seems that a lot of what was going on with Rey and Kylo in The Last Jedi went unspoken. Luke was annoyed with Rey because she kept trying to convince Kylo to leave the dark side of the Force. I think a lot of people at first glance, including Luke, felt that Rey was being naive. But what we couldn't understand was that Rey knew Kylo's mind, because to some extent, it was her mind too. As Kylo and Rey tried to persuade each other in words to come over to their respective sides of the Force, a concurrent conversation was going on inside their minds, involving their knowledge of each other's deepest thoughts and desires. See, Rey knew that Kylo had good left in him because she felt it. To some extent, this was her good too. She knew for a fact that Kylo could be saved because she knew his most hidden thoughts, though she never explicitly said so. We didn't really see Kylo struggle much with his dark side allegiance in The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi, and so it was a bit of a surprise when his reversion to Ben Solo actually happened. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't struggling in his mind, and such conflict is something that Rey could see, giving her a perspective of Kylo that no one else could understand. It should probably also be said that Rey does probably have a soft spot for Kylo because killing Kylo would be akin to killing a part of her. In a way, she was acting out of self-interest. Both Snoke and Palpatine knew that Rey and Kylo were Force bonded, and both tried to use this relationship to their advantage, as Kylo was the bait that could lure Rey to them. But I think Kylo was able to successfully hide the fact that he and Rey were a Force dyad from both of his former masters. When Palpatine took the life essence from Kylo and Rey, I believe this is when he learned about the dyad between the two, and was surprised at the single united supreme power that he had just absorbed. Put Putting it all together, the fact that a dyad in the Force is a single entity is why Kylo had to kill Snoke when he did. He couldn't let Rey die. If she died, his power probably would have diminished to some degree. That said, we don't really know what happens if one body in a dyad dies. We still don't actually know the outcome of Kylo becoming one with the Force at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. Is Rey now left weakened without her other half, or is she strengthened with the addition of Kylo's Force energy? I would say it's at least possible that she has now become the strongest Jedi in history. Of course, I'm just speculating about the potential of the dyad moving forward, but it seems to me that given this special connection between the two, that Kylo's death will affect Rey's power in some way. Well, that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it got you thinking in some way. I don't know whether or not the franchise moving forward will explore the Force dyad further. In any case, please do give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Leave comments down below. Subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell. Definitely follow our Instagram page at The Generation Films. We need you on board. For now, my name is American Ben, and I'll catch you next time. Generation Films, peace.